Dopamine swipe, dopamine swipe. Followers, likes, double tap.
What's going on, beautiful people? Welcome to the 817 podcast, where we talk about daily, weekly trends, insights, topics of the great city of Fort Worth. Jimmy, what's up, man?
Not much. We're sorry we missed everybody last week.
That's
sometimes just like travel schedules get or like Texas freezes, the whole country freezes, and planes are grounded. So
3 canceled flights. I couldn't get here.
You didn't want to drive through the snow from Philadelphia all the way back here.
What's crazy is Dallas, DC was like 55, and then I ended up going to Philadelphia because since I was stuck there, I was like, oh, let me go hang out with my grandma. Which is a bad reason to go see your grandma. I should see her not because I'm stuck, stuck there. But yeah, no. So it was actually pretty beautiful there. But I did take an Amtrak from DC to Philly. It was nice. I was like, man, the Union stations on both sides were super dope. I'm like, man, this is cool. And I was just like, man, we do not live in a city. If anything that DC and Philadelphia taught me is Fort Worth is just one big suburb. Mm-hmm. I was like, man, this is what it feels like.
I saw one conversation on Twitter, I guess this was a couple weeks ago now, how if Milwaukee were the same land area size as Fort Worth, if it covered the same area, it would be 1.2 million people.
Wow.
So, like, we're, actually just bloated Milwaukee.
Yeah, when you got early voting coming, and you got to tell Fort Worthians, hey, this is where Parker and Denton County voting is, because you can't vote for Tarrant. Yeah. That's a problem.
Don't make the wrong turn. Make sure you go to the right one. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot to cover over the last couple of weeks. We're going to start with this conversation about Farrington Field. The city of Fort Worth and Fort Worth ISD, in cooperation with the Urban Land Institute's Dallas-Fort Worth District Council, are sponsoring a panel of 11 real estate experts who will visit Fort Worth on February 15th to 17th to assess opportunities for redevelopment of the Farrington Field site. So basically, Farrington Field is owned by Fort Worth ISD. It sits on the land downtown, right across from Will Rogers, and it last year was added to the National Historic Building Registry, so it is protected in a lot of ways. But the interesting piece of this story to me is that we're trying to figure out how to develop some like mixed use area that includes Farrington Field, that can't really be like touched or manipulated, or I mean it can, but it can't be destroyed, so it has to stay there. But at the same time, Fort Worth just put out a survey about building this exact same type of thing in Keller, which is the soccer stadium story that we have talked about a couple times over the last few months. I just both of these things came across my eye in the same week, and it was like, can we really not put 2 and 2 together and be like, oh, we have this soccer stadium that we want to create a mixed-use development area on, and we have this other soccer stadium we want to build. Why don't we make this an accessible thing that the people of Fort Worth can actually enjoy and have easy access to, instead of going and sticking it up on Basswood, which is already like impossible to get to without adding a huge soccer complex to it.
Man, it is in such the way that area in West 7th has developed too. I just imagine if it did become a soccer complex, it's kind of hard. I mean, it's hard to park. It's hard to get out of. I'm not saying that we shouldn't do it, but I'm just like, man, with nothing going on in Farrington, it's already stressful in that corner. If it became like a regular used place for like kids and families, I wonder, how we manage the parking there as well. I feel like that's going to have to just be a conversation if it becomes like a regularly used spot. And did you mention that this is on the 2:30 p.m. Thursday, February 17th?
So the public meeting where the panel will present their findings and recommendations is Thursday, February 17th at 7:30 p.m. at the Fort Worth Botanic Garden Center. They'll provide the city and Fort Worth ISD with a draft report on the workshop results within 90 days thereafter. Both the city and Fort Worth ISD are contributing $25,000 to cover the panel's costs. It's like we're putting $50,000 into this panel that is giving us recommendations that we're already trying to create elsewhere. So it just, I don't know why Fort Worth continues to not want to take care of its like old things. Like this and LaGrave Field are just, honestly, like, it's irresponsible to have let those turn into what they are. And Farrington is still beautiful.
Yeah, it's nice.
Like, it is not as far gone as LaGrave is at all. But it's just so crazy that we're trying to continue to add more and more in already stressed out areas instead of taking what we have and turning it into something that works for our current needs.
What's the current landscape as a non-soccer fan or goer? What's kind of the current community talking about when it comes to using these resources, either at Farrington or Keller around soccer?
Yeah, so the if you take the survey, you'll get a little bit of insight into the potential, and this would include both a USL men's team, which is like the second division of U.S. soccer. So layman's terms, it's a minor league soccer team, as well as a USL women's team, which their league is set to launch in 2023, which is also would be like the second level of women's soccer. I don't know that shelling out for a massive new complex in North Fort Worth is worthwhile for like taxpayers to invest in. But like downtown, I think you could be swayed a little bit more. Like when I go to Vaqueros games, especially when they used to be played at Farrington, so like pre-pandemic, like I would say 70% of the crowd was Latino, and like they were solid crowds. Like I would say, up to a few thousand people at some matches. So like taking this away from the communities that are like most interested in soccer and are actively going to lower division soccer matches just seems a little bit crazy. So I think it will be beneficial to Fort Worth to continue to have like professional sports for the city to get behind and to really push after. But I think that only works if it is accessible and easy enough to get to. And the example will always go of FC Dallas in Frisco has the worst attendance of any MLS team. Whereas when you look around the country and the new expansion franchises that are going in the hearts of cities, they're thriving. And so I think Fort Worth can be a soccer town, but it's not going to be if everyone's having to try and get up north of 820 to get there.
Well, welcome to the 817 podcast, beautiful people. What we do is 3 short stories and then 1 big story. We got a lot of good stuff today. Any of these next stories could have been the big story, in my opinion, but they all kind of go together. We're going to go ahead and move into the Panther City Island funding kind of update. So the Fort Worth Report posted an article this week discussing how we might be able to fund the additional hundreds of millions of dollars that we need for Panther City in the next 2 years. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers received $403 million for the Central City floor project. But what we also needed was to have additional funding that now looks to be able to be collected through the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, which can cover the rest of the money. What I'm also seeing here in the story, though, that I think is exciting is just the more of communication and the proactiveness from the District U.S. Army Corps of Engineers in Fort Worth. So they're talking about a design build strategy, which this is something that you kind of talked about, like why haven't we designed anything up until this point? But it looks like to expedite also the process, looking to have design and build strategy, which is basically assigning one firm to do both parts, allows it to kind of expedite it, but then also, the accountability is maybe not there if you had two different people doing it. This could be big because it's federal money again, where you're talking about Panther City, Panther Island being built with a lot of federal funds.
Yeah, I thought it was funny. Lon Burnham, member of the Tarrant Regional Water District, has concerns about lack of transparency in a design build approach. And if you're part of the Tarrant Regional Water District, you don't have any say on lack of transparency. Your opinion on something related to that has kind of been void over the past 15, 20 years of this project. But we came on fairly pessimistic about, they said 6-year timeline, is that really going to be 10? But it seems like they are hitting the ground running really quickly, trying to get this done and trying to move at a faster pace than maybe even we were ready or equipped for. And that is a big thumbs up. That's a very good thing that this would get done and not continue to linger. And anybody trying to get in the way of that needs to get out of the way.
Yeah.
It's time to let the big dogs eat. Let's let these people come in and do what they know how to do and help lift them up and support them along the way however we can.
Yep. Well, yeah, I guess that's that. Looking at it, the key here, though, we could not be the ones who win that the B priority for the funding, simply because it's based off of priority and what's most important. But experts or people locally are just kind of saying how economic impact makes it more competitive to get approved for the infrastructure bill funding. So they talk about Fort Worth poverty rate is above the national average, so there should be a prioritization under this direction. But we'll see. That's another thing. It doesn't necessarily mean we would get supported, and how well us Texans support the federal spending. I don't know why we would be prioritized, but we will see.
Yeah, and another part of it is they want to get the current $403 million allocated quickly to show that they're moving and are ready for more funds. So if we really hit the ground running, we show that we're ready to take on more, and that, potentially could also bump us up in priority to getting the extra funding. But all in all, a really positive update, I guess, over where Panther Island is at, just knowing that it's moving faster than we probably could have expected.
Yeah. You want to go ahead and move into the bond story?
Yeah. So this week at City Council, they made it official on a number of things that will be on a May 7th ballot. So write down, tell your friends that I know we're voting in a primary starting now, but there's another election coming May 7th that is going to have a major impact. And the first piece of that is voting on pay raises for city council and mayor, which we'll talk about, but also we will be voting on another $560 million bond. And the way that this breaks down, I think this will be similar to the Fort Worth ISD bond where there's like 4 different pieces that we're voting on. At least I hope it is that way. Because 370 million of that would go to improving roads. And you're probably like, wait a second, didn't we just vote on a $600 million transportation bond to go towards building and fixing more roads? The answer is yes. And somehow they're like, we need $370 million more. There's always money around for roads and cops, but not for anything else that you really want done. The second largest pot, which is $124 million, would go to improvements to the city parks and recreation amenities, which includes a brand new aquatic center in Stop 6 and a completely rebuilt Forest Park pool. Forest Park pool was part of a pretty big debate where they were talking about defunding it within the last couple of months, and citizens showed up, had their voices heard. Now we're looking at getting a completely rebuilt pool there. Funds from Prop C would go towards improving library facilities, including land acquisition for a brand new library in far northwest Fort Worth. And funds from Prop D would go to improving police and fire facilities. So, a lot in there that we'll talk about before we get to mayor and council pay raises.
You see that Proposition E? Look at land acquisition and
that's
open
right.
space new parks. A slideshow presented at Tuesday's city council meeting showed most of this land would be in East Fort Worth, which highlights for areas around Tandy Hills and Oakland Lake.
Big time.
Come on now.
So there's a lot in there for parks and pools that I think is really great and goes in conjunction with January 31st article in the Star-Telegram about how Fort Worth ranks 89th in the country when it comes to accessibility to playgrounds. There are very few people in the city that are a reasonable walking distance to a playground for their kids. And that's something that needs to change and be fixed. And that's something even as we were, trying to figure out what we wanted to do Friday night or Saturday, and it's like, man, if the near south side, if Magnolia had a green space that you could actually go that had a playground on it, not just like the little, dinky Friday on the green patch of grass, like you grab something to eat, you go hang out over there while your kid plays on the playground. Like that's something that's really missing in Fort Worth's development is easy access to parks that are all over the place.
Yeah.
And so I thought it was really interesting that those two things came in conjunction. What thoughts did you have on the bonds?
Well, we're going to get into the pay, but to me, the other big thing is just to note, you want to talk about making a difference in your city. Voting on bond elections matter. Only 18,000 people voted in the 2018 bond election, which is about 2% of the city's population.
Right.
So,
and that'll be really important when we also come talk about council members' pay. To me,
which we can move into, it looks like, right? We're like kind of there.
Yeah, to me, like, I think it's kind of crazy that there is no conversation about public transit incorporated into this. There had been, and then when they proposed the bonds, it was all of a sudden gone. But we're going to put in almost, $400 million into roads again. The
concrete business seems like the business to be in.
The park money is really exciting to me. Like that's something that Fort Worth has long needed to invest in. The aquatic center's also really exciting. Improving library facilities and a brand new library is awesome. Like having the children's library over here has been a massive benefit to the city and especially this neighborhood. Prop D, like, why do we need to spend more money on cops? We already give them like basically all of our money.
Yeah.
And then Prop E, another thing related to parks and empty space, which is very important in growing cities.
Yeah, that East Fort Worth. I mean, there's a good like 7 to 14 acres around Tandy. I mean, if they could allocate, buy some of that land, and I mean, it's already also kind of hilly.
Yeah,
and it's right off the highway. You could get a great view of the city. There could be a lot of cool, creative ways to extend Tandy.
Yeah, I think so. And Tandy doesn't have anywhere to park, which is nice for us in the neighborhood because it kind of keeps it in our niche.
Yeah.
But it doesn't really make it accessible for anybody else trying to come in.
New.
Like, once there's more than 10 cars over there, like it feels really full.
Yeah.
Even though there's a ton of space to explore.
Yeah. So pay, hey, we were, I think we're advocating for pay, but based off this story in Fort Worth Star Telegram, it seems like some people don't believe that this could get through, and not everyone's positive about city council or mayor pay being increased. Looking at this from February 9th by Harrison, Fort Worth City Council members want you to increase their pay by more than 200%. This is being expedited to also May 7th ballot. And what you're looking at is they're looking to increase the mayor pay to $99,653. And to pay for council members would be $76,727, which is up from $25,000. The increase will cost taxpayers $484,000. And the new pay wouldn't kick in until October 1st, 2022. Dallas mayor gets $80,000 annually, and their city council is $60,000 annually. Jimmy, we are San Antonio, by the way, as well, $61,000, and their council is $46,000.
I have plenty of thoughts about this story. But one question I was trying to think about is if you ask the average non-voter in Fort Worth, which is pretty easy, it's 98% of the population, so just go pick out anybody on the street, what they thought the pay of mayor or city councilor was, what do you think they would say?
I don't know. That's a good question.
I think they would say six figures.
Yeah, you think so?
I mean, I think that there is an aura around.
I don't know. I think people would say like $50,000. I don't know. I think money. The older I get, I realize how little people understand money.
Yeah.
Especially I always ask high school kids how much do you think you need to be the average American, household family? And they're like $20,000. I'm like, oh man, you're about to graduate. You have no idea.
Yeah, I think you would get somewhere. I think the lowest you would get is $50,000.
Yeah,
especially for mayor. I think that strikes me as interesting, because I think Fort Worth doesn't want to pay their people, or at least the people that are going to show up don't want to pay our city councilors and mayor, which is a reflection of how they treat Fort Worth. And that is as kind of we can act like we really care about it and really love it, but we're not investing in it, and we're not investing in the people that are trying to invest themselves in it. And so I think it is interesting. I like the criteria that they use for indexing this pay against the salaries of management in the city. I think that's a very fair way to do it. I would probably contend that especially the Dallas and San Antonio councils are also underpaid. But I also think it's interesting that they're kind of swinging for the fences in this. They could have just gone towards matching Dallas and maybe had a better shot. But if we know the dynamic of people that show up for local elections like this, they're older, much more conservative, and I think that this probably would have been better served waiting towards a November more bipartisan ballot, because in my opinion, this is kind of dead in the water right now. Like I don't care how much campaigning and educating city council tries to do about this before the election. I think they're talking to a group of people that aren't going to change their minds on this.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, you got me spinning. The last time voters approved the raise for council members was in 2006, when pay increase went from $3,900 annually to the current salary of $25,000. Jeez, I mean, that's crazy. That's making what a kid work at Sonic in high school was making it in 06. Just working part time.
Yeah, it's also funny that that's around the same time that the federal minimum wage was last touched.
Yeah. But
I think we need to pay the people that are trying to invest themselves in the city. Like, these people spend, I would guess, 80 hours a week being city councilors.
Yeah.
And they get like one person kind of on staff to help them. Like, when we're talking our federal representatives, like, they're getting paid high or 180 grand. They have a staff of like 12 to 14 people, and they barely impact our lives in a practical way. Like, these people have a lot of power over what happens in the city, and we just kind of throw them scraps and say, figure it out.
In 2016, they said no to $45,000 for the council and $60,000 for a mayor. What has changed in 6 years? Said Sal Espino, our guy.
Yeah,
Kellyanne Gray said, what are your thoughts there about people might be open more to pay raises if you also added term limits? Because then you don't have people turning, I guess, being a public servant into, I guess the take is, to a career.
I just don't see those two things as related at all. Like, if you're doing it, I think that this even more incentivizes that you have to get in and do a good job or you're going to be voted out, because people hold the position in higher esteem now that you're getting paid an actual, like, livable salary to do the job that you're doing. I thought, yeah, I saw those as non sequitur, non-related. And I don't think that, with elections every 2 years, I think that we'd have pretty firm term limits on, if you're not serving your people, you're going to get voted out.
Yeah. I wonder what's going to happen. I mean, it sounds like no one's excited about this actually happening.
It's like,
but we're so young and progressive in our little bubble over here on the 817 podcast. I'm like, who's going to say, why would you say no to this? But this is classic boomers ruining millennials' lives, I guess. You got a bunch of old people, and then now the city council's young. It's like, no, they can't use our dollars.
Yeah,
that we inflated the economy on, so they can't live.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. This is one of those things that, like, Fort Worth just kind of shows where its roots are when it comes to this, and it's reflective of Texas. Texas only pays our state representatives like $7,500 a year.
Yeah,
which is ludicrous.
Yeah.
And Fort Worth continues to live in that small town vein and hasn't taken the step up to the big leagues. So I think that this is it's a slam dunk that it needs to happen, but I feel, in my opinion, it seems like it's dead in the water already. I would love to be wrong. I would love for this to pass. But I don't think that we should not continue to set ourselves up where only the elites with disposable income and significant passive income and are able to spend all their time actively on city council are the ones that can
right
run.
like if you think about it, like if you look at the Republican candidates, they seem to be like they'll be all right if this doesn't go up, right? Firestone, he's like, I'm good, right?
Right.
You know, Moon got his businesses, I'm good, right? But Nettles, Jared Williams, you know, this could be life changing. Their commitment to our city could be life changing depending on this vote.
Yeah.
Crazy
So
stuff.
there's a lot that's going to be coming on May 7th. Let's make it 3% that turn out. You know, if it's 3% instead of 2% that turn out, that's another 9,000 people that could easily sway the way that this vote goes. Like, the power is in our hands to do something. We just have to get our friends out to vote.
And it is weird for like city council. Like, there's so much to be talking about. The last thing they're going to be walking around the city educating people on is like, hey, you should give me a raise.
Yeah.
Hey,
yeah,
make sure you go out and vote for I get a 200% raise.
A 400% raise.
Yeah. Well, let's go ahead and move into right. I guess if you're listening to this on Monday, today is early voting. So this is the big story. We would just want to kind of break down and do kind of what we usually do around election time. So early voting is kicking off. You know, you can take your loved ones. It's Valentine's.
Yeah.
And, you know, hit the polls before going to dinner or getting ice cream or whatever you guys do these days. But yeah, what do you want to kind of break down? Let the people know.
So there's a lot on the ballot, a lot of it's all primaries. The first thing I want to point out is that Texas is an open election state, which means that you can vote in either the Republican or the Democratic primary, regardless of what party you're registered for. And I think that's an important distinction when, not to be like super pessimistic, but for statewide elections, like, Republicans are probably going to carry things. So if you would rather have a say in what is happening statewide, even if you're registered as a Democrat, it might be wise to, you know, throw your voice into the ring and voting in the Republican primary. Obviously, that choice is totally up to you.
And then by doing so, though, you have to, this election, have to vote all Republican this time around. Like, you can't, in the primary,
right.
You have to
you would
be
only
Republican all the way down.
Right. You would only vote on the Republican primary ballots, or you would only vote on the Democratic primary ballots.
But then when it's now Democrats versus Republicans, you can switch.
Right. Well, in
like
in like a bipartisan election like that, you're voting for both regardless.
Yeah.
So
I guess
it only affects the primaries. So you can walk up regardless of party. If you're a Republican, you can walk up, say, I want to vote in the Democratic primary. Like, if there's a Democrat you really hate that someone's running up against, you can walk up and say, like, hey, I want to vote in the Democratic primary, and vice versa. If you're a Democrat and there's some Republicans you really hate, you can vote for the people trying to knock them out of their incumbency spot.
I feel like that, because there's a lot of Republicans on this list that I'm like, ugh, we got to make sure that person doesn't win. Like incumbents, like Beth Van Dyne, they're not like, do we vote? We don't vote for her in our area, do we?
Yeah.
Is she all the way over here now?
Well, I don't know if that's, I don't think she's all the way to ours.
Yeah. But there's a lot of people on here. It's like, man, so I would rather take this person over the crazy person, but then I still would want to then vote.
But then you could vote for the other party in the normal election.
So it almost would make sense for all of us to vote Republican.
I mean, it does make sense to me in a lot of cases in Texas or really in any state that has open elections like this, to vote in the dominant party's primary, because then you have more of a voice in who's most likely getting elected.
Yeah.
But we've got a ton of U.S. House seats: District 6, District 12, District 24, 25, 26, 30, and 33. In 5 of those districts, there is a Republican runoff, and in 2 of those districts, there's a Democratic runoff. So plenty either way, whichever ballot you're voting on, you've got a number of things to vote for there. Texas State Senate, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different elections. Only 2 of them are really contested, though. If you're voting on the Republican ballot, District 10 and District 12, you would actually be voting. And in the Democrat ballot, only District 12 has a runoff for the nomination. The Texas House, there are 11 seats that are being voted on, with a number of them being contested, including Careless Carey running in District 93 against a couple of other Republicans. Texas State Board of Education, which is obviously a very important spot right now, as Texas tries to censor everything that can be taught to students. District 11 and District 13. In District 11, either ballot you are voting in a runoff. In District 13, only the Republican side has a runoff. The Court of Appeals has one position that we're voting for, but there's only one candidate, so there's not necessarily anything on this ballot you'd be voting for. And now the Tarrant County stuff. Tarrant County judge, that Glenn Whitley is stepping down from. Are we going to have another Deborah Peoples, Betsy Price showdown? I don't know. It'll be interesting to see. There's 5 Republicans and 2 Democrats, so either way, you're voting for somebody in the primary. Tarrant County District Attorney also has a runoff on both sides. Tarrant County Commissioner's Court, there's two seats up for grabs, and in Precinct 2, there's a Democratic runoff. In Precinct 4, there's a Republican runoff. Tarrant County District Clerk has a Republican runoff. Tarrant County Clerk doesn't have anything that anybody else to vote for. Civil District Courts, 3 positions, but none of them have a runoff. County Courts at Law, there's a few positions up for grabs. None of them are contested. County Criminal Courts, only one of them is contested, even though there's 10 up for grabs. Actually, sorry, 2. Criminal District Courts, Family Courts, Juvenile Court, Probate Courts, Justice of the Peace, Tarrant County Constable. There's a ton of stuff on here.
Yeah, I was wondering if we can eventually find a list as we get more into it where it shows kind of their political voting, if they're more conservative, more centered, stuff like that. I think that would be helpful, especially if you got people like me who's now going to go vote on the Republican side. I don't know the difference from some of these people at this moment. So it seems like a lot of work.
Yeah.
But also what I thought about while looking at this, I wonder how many of these people now, if Fort Worth City raises like that, where city council's making 10x, a House rep, would some of these people now move into competing in Fort Worth? Like Ramon Romero, who I think is like a classic Fort Worthian, Nicole Collier,
It's interesting, and I think, a year ago or whatever, when we were talking to Dr. Ferris, she kind of contended, I don't know if a state position is necessarily a higher position than a city position is. So, yeah, like Carrie Moon obviously sees the city council as a stepping stone to state and then potentially beyond that. But, yeah, if you could go from making $7,500 at the state level to significantly more than that at the city level, like I think you could still parlay city experience into national experience if that's what you're trying to do. So that is an interesting thought of what direction do you see as upward progression? Is it just financial or is it scope of influence?
Yeah, I think of the like Pete Buttigieg's of the world, where I feel like you could build more celebrity as well for national runs.
Yeah,
by being a face of a city.
Yeah, well, I mean, Beto was a state representative, and parlayed that to a lot of fame. And now trying to run for governor, which those are also on this ballot, like the governor primary, the attorney general primary. Those things are also all on this ballot, which if you want to vote against Greg Abbott multiple times, voting in the Republican primary is the way to do that, although I don't know if the other options are that great. But that's an interesting, but
that's where I'm trying to get.
Does Beto have a better shot
yes,
against
100%.
Against Don Huffines than?
Yes.
Probably. But then if it doesn't work out and we're stuck with Don Huffines as our governor, who wants to eliminate property taxes, which is like the only way that Texas funds government, we might be in for a rough go at it there.
But is it as bad as the guy who wants to eliminate abortions and put up walls? And you're poison.
Yeah, it's all poison.
Yeah, but I didn't realize Beto is also having competition. Supposedly, I saw in this. There's like two or three other people running for Democratic governor. I don't know who they are, and I don't know if there's some people who, because
I think that's kind of indicative of what the competition is.
Did you see AOC was in San Antonio?
Yeah.
That was kind of cool.
That was cool. But a lot of these races, especially when we're looking down at the judgeship, it's only Republicans running. And I think that that's really indicative of how thin the bench for the Democratic Party is in Texas, and kind of gives a lens into what the national Democratic Party thinks of Texas, which is that it's not a winnable state in the near future. It's invested a ton in Georgia, it's investing in Virginia, North Carolina, these Michigan, Wisconsin, these actual swing states. And Texas, it's we're not developing people to provide any sort of competition to all of these Republican incumbents.
Man, Georgia's going to be crazy again.
Oh, yeah.
It's going to be wild.
Especially with Stacey Abrams running to,
Yeah.
And after what
Warnock.
happened last time, where there's, controversy around if that election was stolen from Stacey Abrams.
Yeah. It feels like a Mayweather-Pacquiao fight. Yeah. It feels like the rematch we always wanted. Canelo against Mayweather. All right, so cool. Let's go ahead and move in wins and losses and continue on a great episode. Shout out to everybody who's still there on the 817 pod.
Yeah, I'll start. This weekend was the 1-year anniversary of that massive car pileup on 35 South on the toll road. February 11th last year, 6 people died, and Fort Worth proclaimed it Fort Worth First Responders Day and installed 2 park benches at Riverside Park. And I'm just you know what we could do? we could actually hold the people accountable that were responsible for not having these roads prepped the way that they needed to be, and not building and designing in a way that makes them safe. But no, we're just going to install a couple park benches and say, yeah, like, we hope you feel honored by this. Like, and that's the trend that we have obviously moved towards. Like, you know, the U.S. is the home, the mecca of school shootings and gun violence. And we just say, like, that was sad. We hope you'll get over, you know, the trauma or losing a family member or losing a classmate. Here's a little plaque. But we don't do things to actually hold people accountable and make meaningful change. And this just kind of feels like a thing that was quickly brushed under the rug, especially because the power grid went down, you know, within a couple of days of this. And so it, one, made me really sad reflecting on what happened and just what an insane and tragic thing that it was. And then that led into some frustration about how we act like we're really honoring these people by installing a couple park benches and thanking our firefighters and cops for getting out there. Yeah.
That was a crazy time. Crazy time. Well, my loss, my loss is kind of much more lighter, but not as important as what Jimmy just eloquently shared. And it's basically Fort Worth. It's about Fort Worth Recycling Company is partnering with a zoo to create zoo poo, which allows you to purchase poop for fertilization. And this poop is from herbivores in the zoo, like elephants, gorillas, orangutans. And you can now buy zoo poo to run your soil. So I thought this was like a cool story and really cool. But here is the problem, right? Here's the L. And I had to really dig for an L today. I had like a lot more wins. But they're partnering with Dallas Zoo. Dallas Zoo. The Fort Worth entrepreneur has to go to Dallas to innovate. This is a classic entrepreneurial story in Fort Worth. If you want to innovate, you got to go to Dallas. You got to partner with Dallas because Fort Worth isn't the place that does things first. So shout out to this Silver Creek business for making that happen. I just saw, hey, another entrepreneur having to go to Dallas to grow their business.
It is a bummer. And so I'll add that we recently joined the Fort Worth composting pilot program.
Ooh.
And it's been great for us so far. If you're interested, go to just search Fort Worth composting pilot program, and you can be part of it. But I think it's a big win that we're investing in cleaner ways of disposal and better ways of disposal. But I agree with you. I'm sure that Baby Brazos is churning out a good bit of zoo poo that could be used as well instead of having to go to Dallas for it. My win is artist Cedric Huckabee's new museum aims to bring art to Fort Worth's Polytechnic Heights. The former painting instructor to George W. Bush is a painter, sculptor, and social engagement artist, and he has bought his grandmother, Big Mama's 120-year-old Fort Worth house and is turning it into a collaborative, multi-purpose art space. Each of the 6 rooms in the house are in varying states of reinvention, but they're preparing for the February opening of Kinfolk House in the Polytechnic Heights neighborhood. I loved his comparison to Magic School Bus. School bus comes to kids and it would do whatever it needed to do to get them to the place of learning. It could shrink, go inside somebody's body, fly into space. That's how he thinks about this space. doing whatever it needs to get kids to a place of learning about art. And so this is an exciting thing for our neck of the woods over here. I'm excited to get to go check this out in some capacity.
When does it
once
open?
they're open. It didn't have a firm date. It just said preparing for the February opening.
Ooh, okay.
And it's February.
Yep. Awesome. Well, my win is something that we would have probably addressed if I was here last week. My win is an easy one. Opal Lee up for the Nobel Peace Prize. Members of Congress from across the country made their voices heard for Opal Lee, the grandmother of Juneteenth. How cool would this be? I think that would be epic if Opal Lee won the Nobel Peace Prize. That would be just crazy. A lady from South Side Fort Worth, historic South Side, making things happen. Opal Lee is like the LeBron James of equity for Fort Worth. Like, if we did not have her, she is hiding so much of our like racial flaws by being so great. She's like literally just putting us on the map in so many good ways. And if we didn't have her, it's just crazy.
I think it's all like there's a flip side to that, though. People who continue to vote against and work against equity can tout like, oh, look at what Opal's doing in Fort Worth. We're doing so great and all of these things, when we're really lagging in a lot of areas or continuing to vote and invest in ways that are not in the interest of equity. So, like, yes, but also, like, we can't, it's the putting 2 park benches instead of fixing our problems. Like, we can't just let leaders use that as a poster to hide all the holes and cracks.
Yeah. You're 100% correct.
But I don't need to end this on a negative note. Like, Opal, like a Fort Worth
It'd just be
person
fire for her flowers.
Yeah, a
She
Fort
needs her
Worth
flowers.
person is being nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize, and that's an insanely cool win.
Yeah. But you're right. Like I said, she's like the LeBron James of equity. Like we're the Cavaliers, and we
got Kyle Korver.
Yeah. I'm even talking like rookie year LeBron James when he had like a Gauskas.
Zydrunas.
So it's like I'm talking like literally carrying the Fort Worth team.
Yeah.
And making us look a lot more responsible than we are. But there's also other cool things happening. I mean, there
is a lot of we just highlighted a cool museum.
Yeah.
We've got all the development in Stop 6 and
the Fort Worth Science History Museum's having the Green Book like exhibit now that looks really cool about how the Green Book that African Americans used during the Jim Crow to navigate the country. I think about that today as a mobile app. Like what if the Green Book was a digital app?
Yeah. Honestly, like, are we that far from people needing that? Maybe that's too pessimistic of a thought to throw out at the end of the show.
But no, yeah, I think we have a lot of good stuff happening in Fort Worth as well. But it would be foolish for us to not mention Opal Lee's Nobel Peace Prize run. I don't know who she's going up against. Probably people who like pit a pig heart and some old man that now live. Stiff competition. But let's do it.
Thanks everyone for tuning in. We've got a big announcement next weekend about something we're going to be a part of in March. So keep your ears peeled for that. But thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next week.
Swipe, dopamine, swipe. Follow us, likes, double tap. Now they control your life. Dopamine, swipe. Follow us, like, double tap. Now they control your life.